Good morning. We're now going to do the second section and only the first half of the second session for chapter 28, which is due on the 30th of April. And the first two words are somewhat you should recognize because they're very similar to the words we had before. We had the word aphelion, away from the sun. This is apogee, away from the Earth, geo Earth, the point in the orbit of a satellite, namely the moon, at which that satellite is furthest from the Earth. The other word we had is perihelion, closest to the sun. This is perigee, closest to the Earth, a point in the orbit of a satellite, moon, at which the satellite is closest to the Earth. Now, those two words are important because they give you the eclipses. So if you look at that first word, word 11, eclipse, Greek eclipsis, a passing over, an event in which the shadow or one celestial object or body falls on another. And I'm going to do a diagram of these a little later on the board. And if you have that diagram, if you look at the diagram on your next page over there, on page 727, the top of that diagram, and it says you have two shadows. The umbra is when it's a complete umbra, feminine shade, shadow. The inner cone-shaped part of the shadow cast by the Earth or the moon, in which the sunlight is completely blocked. So if it's cast by the moon, you would have a solar eclipse. If it's cast by the Earth, the shadow, you'd have a lunar eclipse. And we're going to show you that in a minute. Now, if you're not in that complete shadow, the outside of that shadow is called a penumbra, almost an umbra, shade, shadow, ghost. The outer part of the shadow cast by the Earth or the moon, in which the sun is only partially blocked. If you could go up, please, and get solar eclipse to the top. Very good. So you have two kinds of eclipses. You can have a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. And if you could have either a partial solar eclipse, partial lunar eclipse, or a complete, okay? Or you can have an annular eclipse. This is very unique, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So, solar eclipse, the passing of the moon between the Earth and the sun. During a solar eclipse, the shadow of the moon falls on the Earth, and you happen to live in that dark shadow in the umbra part of that, you have a total eclipse. The sunlight is completely blocked by the moon when one is within the umbra. Then a partial eclipse, the sunlight is partially blocked by the moon when one is within the penumbra, and you can see that diagram on your book, the difference between the umbra and the penumbra. Now, an annular eclipse is very unique. If the moon happens to be at apogee and the sun is out there, it's not big enough even on the umbra to totally block it. You get a ring, and that's called an annular eclipse. When the moon is at or near apogee, the umbra is too short to completely block the sun, and a ring of light appears around the moon. The opposite of a solar eclipse is a lunar eclipse. The passing of the moon through the Earth's shadow. Well, the Earth is much bigger, therefore the shadow, the umbra is going to be bigger, and the penumbra is going to be bigger. So you have more often you can see a lunar eclipse, and more rarely can you actually see the solar eclipse because you have to be in a perfect line, 180-degree angle, to have that solar eclipse and lunar eclipse. But this you can see more frequently. And the phases of the moon we're going to do in the next reading section, but I bring it up, the varying shape of the visible portion of the moon. And we talked about this before. You can have a new moon, which is right now, or no moon, and you get bigger, 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 bigger. When it's that first quarter, you then have a half a moon being visible. Then the gibbous gets bigger, bigger, bigger until you get a full moon, and then you get smaller, smaller to third quarter, and then back to no moon. I think yesterday or the day before was the new moon phase. We're now ready to have a diagram on the board, please. We're now on page 727. And look at my primitive diagram. I have the sun way over there, giving its rays coming this way, and I have the earth here. And if the moon happens to be here at a lovely 180-degree angle, what happens? The shadow of the moon falls on the earth. And then you'd have a total eclipse of these people living here could not see the sun. If you're over here, you'd have a partial eclipse, and here there'd be no eclipse whatsoever. So you can see how very few people can see that total eclipse because they have to be living where the umbra is in relationship to the sun, which has to be a 100-degree angle. Now, I'm going to put the moon on the other side. And what happens when I put the moon on the other side? The shadow of the earth is so big that the whole moon is blocked out in the umbra. And that is a lunar eclipse. And if you're up here, that'd be a partial lunar eclipse. But this has to be in a 100-degree angle. Now, why do you have a full moon? Because sometimes the moon happens to be just, even though it's a full moon, it might be over here, a full moon up here. The sun is so big that the light hits the moon and fills it all up anyway. All right? Now, if you have no moon, which we just had the other day, what happens? You can't see the moon because the sunlight is so forceful. There's not a 100-degree angle. The moon is not a practically 180-degree angle, and you can't see the moon. That's called a new moon or no moon, and eventually then you get the crescent, 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 crescent until first quarter. All right? And then you get gibbous, gibbous, gibbous until full moon. Smallest, we get a gibbous, gibbous, gibbous until third quarter. Smaller, smaller crescent until no moon. And we're going to do that the following part. It's all in this chapter to be read, but we're dividing the words into two sections because there's so many. So I wanted you to make sure you look at the diagram on page 727 and the diagram on 729. So I gave you both of those on the board. I think your book is actually clearer, but do study this. You can finish reading this chapter. We'll finish the words then on the next day, which will be due on then May 1st. These are due April 30th. Have a good day. I hope everybody's happy and well, and I miss you all. I don't like doing these silly tapings on the things, but I hope you all are learning something. Thank you. God bless. Bye-bye.